Meeting is now streaming live. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Kim Tolson here. I'm here with Annie Day. She
hey
is
guys.
she is the expert biller in my membership group, Bill Like a Boss. So we wanted to hop in today because I recently put a poll in the group about secondary insurance billing, and the overwhelming answer that came up with, I don't even know what that is. And I don't even know how to find out what that is or how to deal with that at all. So I thought I'd bring Annie in today just real quick just to give us a few tips around that. Like, what do you even
Mhm.
do to get started with secondary insurance billing? So Annie, if you want to introduce yourself, let them know who you are, let them know about your company, and then maybe we can give
Yeah,
a few tips this morning to help you guys with this topic.
yeah. My name is Annie Day, like Kim said, and I work for a New Dawn, a New Beginning virtual assistant, and we've been working with Kim for almost 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
So,
you guys.
yeah, we love you too. And we've learned so much from Kim and her groups. But yeah, secondary billing, a lot of people, it's kind of like a little taboo. I don't know where to start. It's a new can of worms. One easy thing in your intake paperwork, is always, have that question, do you have secondary insurance? Um,
Okay.
and unfortunately, a lot of times members, your clients may not know if they have secondary insurance. If they do, sometimes it's hard to figure out which one is primary and which one is secondary. But I'm definitely in that intake paperwork because if for some reason they do have secondary and they tell you, months later down the road, anything that you're not able to go back and bill, you're covered as long as that is in your intake paperwork. You can go back and say, you didn't let us know, it's past timely filing, that's now your responsibility. Just, as a clinician, you're covered on all the bases to make sure that you're getting that payment for those services that are written.
Mm-hmm.
Another
Yeah.
way is when you do call and verify those benefits, even if it's the primary or the secondary payer, it's called coordination of benefits, and they should be able to tell you that information. So,
Okay. Like which one's primary and which one's secondary? Okay.
yep.
Yeah,
So
that's such a good
if
tip.
Jane Doe comes in and she says she's marked the box, she doesn't have secondary information, I always ask for the coordination of benefits, and they'll say, there's none on file. So then that's their primary, that's their only policy.
Yeah.
Medicare is I would say probably all of primary billing that goes to secondary. You have Medicare as a primary, and they're really good about that process in that they forward that for you. So
Yeah,
then the
that
only
makes
thing
it
you're
so
doing,
easy.
it really, really does. So then the only thing you're waiting on is that payment to kind of come back to you. And it can take a little bit. But then, a lot of people look at their EHRs, whether it's simple practice or therapy notes or, whatever clearinghouse they're using, and they say, oh, I don't even know, how to bill for secondary or what all to include or how to send that. And they've really done a good job as long as you've got the information in there, making it pretty easy to make those claims to go to secondary.
Once you do. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yep. So if your
Yeah.
information is coming back to simple practice and you have their secondary information listed, then all you're waiting on is that primary EOB to come back, and then it's just a few clicks to send that on to secondary.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do if you find out later that there was a secondary all along and the client just didn't even tell you? Because we had a question here the other day. Somebody said, the client decided not to tell me about the secondary because it was Medicaid and they didn't want to tell me about that. They thought I wouldn't take them. Like
Mhm.
somebody posted that in the group the other day, and then they went and found out later there was a Medicaid policy. So what like I know we're going to cover all of this in that webinar we're doing, but
Mhm.
what is a process for that? Because I do see that come up a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, I do ask an intake. I ask the client. They sometimes they don't even know they have a secondary.
Right.
So what would
So,
you do in that situation with you guys or
so,
how you bill?
so with that, I would definitely get all of the information and then contact that payer and just say,
Okay.
hey, this is the kind of situation that we've had. We have the coordination of benefits from the primary payer. A lot of times, and this part is tricky. Some will allow, because you're in network with the primary, they may pay something towards that secondary payment, even if you're not in network. Sometimes you're in network with a secondary and not the primary, but I would definitely call and just say, this is kind of the situation we're in. We weren't able to submit any of those claims. This is our date range. Are we able to submit that? And kind of how do you want that? Because a lot of
Okay.
them, you can file electronically. Some of them, they may want like an actual, not like the EOB information attached to the claim. They want to see that EOB. So sometimes that may be a mail-in fax. But I would definitely always call and just see, like what their process is. And then, what maybe anything if they're going to cover from that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
So,
that's a good tip.
thinking about like opting out, I don't really see any reason why you would opt out of your secondary insurance.
Hmm.
But, if that's something, they say like, I was afraid you wouldn't take me. Or, if it's something you're not in network with the primary, but you are in network with the secondary, during those verification and benefit calls, you can definitely see like, okay, I know the primary is going to deny and they're going to, forward that to you. What does that look like for me as an in-network provider with secondary? And they should be able to give you that information.
That's such a good point. Yeah. So even if the client fails to tell you, if you're calling
Mhm,
and verifying benefits up front,
mhm,
a lot of times you're going to get that information already.
mhm. Because unfortunately, a lot of them don't know.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of times it becomes this, well, I wasn't told, or they, hid the information, but unfortunately, a lot of them don't know. And then, we
Yeah.
see a lot of insurance changes, with clients, and a lot of them don't know, when this policy termed or when this one was effective. So we've kind of made it our policy with our practice that we don't really depend on them for that information.
That's
Just
smart.
because, well, and like Blue Cross Blue Shield last year, they stopped covering telehealth services, and then a lot
Oh,
of their
yes.
members, really caused a riot, which they should have. So they've retroactively covered a lot
Oh,
of those. Like we just got some of those payments from September of last year.
oh my gosh.
So getting that information from the insurance company, you've got a reference number. It just gives you that much more of a leg to stand on if for some reason you do run into any sort of issue with that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Annie. I just
Yeah,
wanted to
you're
touch on
welcome.
that because that was the biggest one that came up, and I was sort of surprised
Yes.
because it's like one, I don't even know what that is. So,
Mhm.
that's one of the big things that I want
Mhm.
to just bring awareness. Like, please make sure you're at least asking your
Mhm.
clients if they have a secondary, and then upon the verification of benefits, make sure you're
Mhm.
asking if there's anything else on file. That's like sort of a foolproof way to try to not get
Mhm.
into this trap where it's like, oh my God, I was supposed to be billing the secondary for the last year,
Yeah. And
because
part of that, secondary insurances do have a longer, period that you can bill. But sometimes you do run out of that and that timely filing. And then, because for whatever reason that member didn't disclose that information to you, then that does become their responsibility.
yeah, hmm,
So
right, yeah,
it just, as a clinician, you're covered kind of in every, especially with some of these insurance contracts, like you signed a contract with us, but you haven't billed their secondary, and you have that paper trail of I called, here's intake paperwork, like that was never provided. And a lot of times,
right,
like if you're running into issues, even with primary, a lot of times, like, members get those once a year. You have to verify you don't have any other insurance, things like that. They'll say, well, we're not paying this because they haven't updated their coordination of benefits. So having that kind of like on your radar when you're talking to members, when you're talking to those insurance companies, really helps cover that secondary. And, different
absolutely.
as just primary insurance policies are changing. Well, this one turned here, so then this one became effective, because a lot of times they don't know that. And unfortunately, that is not always communicated to the client. So,
Yeah, wow, yeah. So we just wanted to bring you that little bit of information since that was the glaring thing on that poll that we did. And we are having a full masterclass on this topic on September 1st at 11 a.m. We're going to cover which insurance is primary and secondary, go a little bit
mhm.
more in depth about that, which one to bill first, and if you actually need to bill both, which yes, you do. But we'll talk more about that. How do I incorporate this into my paperwork? I think Annie's going to give us, you're actually going to give us your
Like a
paperwork
resource
and
guide.
how it
Yep.
looks, a resource guide for
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Also,
And then,
in that resource guide, like specifically what to ask, what to kind of add in there when you're verifying insurance. If you ever have to call, like on a secondary policy, kind of what that script can kind of look like, we'll include all of that. And then, like you said, that
awesome.
process of secondary billing, what they require, what they're looking for, how to submit, things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Totally. It's going to be so helpful. We're also going to talk about what if there's a third policy
Mhm.
that does happen. I'm going to let Annie handle that one. I've never even had that come up, but I know it does come up.
I think we've had
Um,
it come up once, just once. But yeah, I
yeah,
was like, tertiary, what is
it's
this?
like, what? What do we do with this? So Annie's going to touch on that just a little bit in case you
Yep.
want to come back to want to come back to it because it is a lifetime course. So if that comes up later, you can go back and watch what to do about that. How to build it in your EHR. So Annie and
Mhm.
Donna are experts with all these different EHRs. They're going to give a little guidance around that. How do you build if you don't have an EHR? Like if you have to
Mhm.
like actually send in a paper secondary
Mhm.
claim, that happens sometimes,
Mhm.
and people
Yep.
are like, "What the heck do I do with this?"
Yeah.
And systems to keep track of all of that because you do need a way to like figure out, hey, is this secondary even paying? You
Mhm.
know, and
Yep.
it can take a long time. You can lose track of that. You're not
Mhm.
billing the client. If the
Yeah.
secondary doesn't pay, you have to, you know, be aware of
Mhm.
that so you can go back and actually collect from the client.
Yeah.
A lot
And
of people leave
unfortunately,
that money.
yeah,
Okay.
because that is such a process, sometimes that can, but as long as you have a consistent process set up from the beginning, it helps catch some of those.
Yeah, and Annie and Don are going to cover that too, which I'm so grateful for. And then we also talk about like Medicare. If it doesn't forward it to the secondary, how do you handle
Mhm.
that? Because most of us that are Medicare billers, we're just like, I don't know, maybe a little spoiled with that process. You
Yeah.
just expect that they're going to send it on and it's going to get paid.
Yeah,
And
for
I'm
sure.
guilty of not even necessarily always following up either to even see if, like if it's an anthem and they're picking up like 12 bucks or something, you know, I
Yeah.
might not go and like track that down. So I'm guilty of that. So, oh, hi.
Say hi.
Hi,
Good
we have a little
morning.
guest. Yeah, hello.
But yeah.
Oh, how cute is that? Oh, do you wanna do some secondary billing with us?
Hey, she's got a little keyboard that she taps on when I'm at home with her, and I'm like, "Yep, go ahead and send that claim for me." She's gonna be a
Hi,
master before she goes to school.
she's so cute.
Say
Oh my
hello.
God, you are adorable.
Say thank you.
Oh my gosh. And that's about it. And then at the end, we're gonna have a live Q&A. So if you've
Yep.
got like really specific problems that you've just never been able to figure out, we're gonna help
Mhm.
you with that too.
Yep. Yeah, bring
So
specific issues or payers or, like things like that, and we'll try and help. And then if nothing else, we do have the option for you guys to reach out to me, and to him, and we can try to help, work through that.
yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I hope you guys are having a good Friday. We thought we'd just
Yep.
pop in here. I'm going to drop the link if you guys want to come to the webinar. It's September 1st. It will be recorded. You can go back and watch it. You have lifetime access if you can't watch it live. And you
Perfect.
can submit questions ahead of time. I'll
Yeah.
I'll ask Annie and Donna the day of if you can't come.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, well have a good day.
Say
Bye-bye. Bye.
bye. Say bye.